Our first session deals with a question that's really important to ESOP companies. You know, making shares of company stock available to employee owners really has no meaning unless you're willing to buy those shares back when those individuals leave. But how many people leave? And when do they leave? How many shares do they have? How much money do you have to plan to have, and at what time in the future? That's a big question. To help us answer that question, we've got two executives from Ridge ESOP Associates. We've got Kevin Rush and Tom Robach. Kevin has more than 23 years of experience in the industry, and he built and manages their customized repurchase obligation studies. Tom has more than 29 years of experience. He's an expert in ESOPs, 401ks, and compensation administration. Please welcome to the stage, Kevin and Tom.
Good morning. Since 1988, we've been providing plan administration and online services for ESOP companies. We've got a deep bench of talented professionals at our firm, and also always looking to stay up, in front of the technology curve. So with that, maybe we can just start very basic here with, what is repurchase obligation? So it's really a legal and maybe moral obligation the company has to make a market for the shares for the participants who've retired, died, become disabled, or quit with a vested balance. So, and I know certainly something to keep your eye on the ball there, and a lot of ESOP companies will worry about that, but I just, I think it's good to keep that in perspective because essentially a repurchase obligation is not always a negative. It's a reflection on the value that's been built by the ESOP. So it's something that I think we should focus along those lines, and certainly some people would feel it's the main reason that you have the ESOP, and that you would keep that in mind there. So. And then I guess we've got a couple of slides here coming up here. So certainly, like everything, the planning is important with repurchase obligations. And keep in mind that every closely held company has a repurchase obligation. So, and in a way, ESOPs have an advantage because their repurchase obligation comes in small blocks. Other closely held companies, their repurchase obligation is usually all at once. So that's another thing to keep in mind there. But the reason the planning is important is certainly you want to avoid surprises, a bubble in the snake, a lot of people retiring in the same year, things like that. It's definitely prudent to run a repurchase study. I'd say on average, probably about every 2 to 3 years, ESOP companies will run a repurchase study, and we feel that at least every 3 years is a good idea. We do have many clients that will run a study every year there. And certainly to make sure your ESOP is sustainable. We've met a lot of ESOP companies here already that have had their ESOP since 74, 45 years, different, some really long-term mature ESOPs, and I give them credit for that there. And Kevin's going to talk about benefit levels, but basically, just to start on a basic level there, what a benefit level is really the percentage of share released over the eligible wages there. So, and so our innovation is our newest software, ESOP Horizon, and thanks to Kevin, it was rolled out the end of 2014. And the services include really a custom 20-year study for your ESOP. The corporate and ESOP goals are combined into one report. And again, it'll allow you to project, it will help you project out those benefit levels and measure those and evaluate the plan design for it's a good opportunity to kind of look at your plan design, make sure it fits with what you want to do long-term for the company and for the ESOP. And certainly you have full reports for the management board and trustees.
Our process in working with these repurchase studies is to be very hands-on with the client. We want to walk them through step-by-step of the process, helping them understand all the different triggers that will impact the overall end results of the repurchase obligation study, So we'll have a phone call to focus on the participant level assumptions, the company value assumptions, and the trust activity assumptions, helping them understand how each piece moves the needle with regards to the final result. We go through that process with them. We take the data from our software. We prepare a draft scenario report so they can see on a preliminary basis how the results turned out. And then we spend time walking through the report with them page by page so they understand what they're looking at. And they may decide then that they want to change an assumption or two before they finalize that first scenario, which is perfectly fine once they understand how the pieces all move together. And then thereafter, we can run additional scenarios. With our standard service offering, we give them 2 scenarios for our standard fee, and then you can run additional scenarios too, just at time and expense. It's not too expensive to run additional scenarios. You're probably looking $300 or $400 for an additional scenario. The majority of the time is taken up front to draft that first scenario and the second scenario. But it's a great process to go through with the client so they can understand how all these different pieces impact the overall results of the study. When we prepare the final package for the client, we give them a big array of different reports they can look at. We share with them all the different assumptions that were used on a company basis, the trust activity assumptions, the participant level assumptions. We will show them how the shares are currently allocated in the plan to your active participants based upon the different groups that we use, as well as based upon the different age ranges of the participants in your plan. That can be pretty enlightening. You'll see a company that's been in industry for 10 plus years, they'll have a significant percentage of shares in their older participants' accounts. And that can be a sign that you guys start looking at how is this going to look in the next 5, 10, 15 years as these participants meet retirement age. Likewise, I've worked with some companies where they have a fitness club. Most of their employees are 30 to 40 years old. So you don't see that big share of allocations in older participants' accounts, which will make a dramatic impact on the overall results of the study. We also look at the repurchase obligation reasons that you'll see with regards to why you had this repurchase obligation, retirement, death, disability, diversification, and regular turnover of service. We'll have reports that show that broken down by the different components of the analysis. We'll show how the shares flow in the plan from one year to the next, whether they come in the plan with contributions or share releases, or they got reallocated with forfeitures. We'll show shares leaving the plan due to stock distributions or the company buying more shares, for example, with stock purchases. That can all be put into this analysis when we do these 20-year projections. And same thing with cash. There are a couple plans that have significant cash in their ESOP, and we want to forecast that as well because they're using that cash to pre-fund the repurchase liability. And to the extent that they're using that method, we want to make sure that there's enough cash in the plan. If there's not enough cash in the plan, the system will automatically tell you how much more you got to put into the plan so you don't go negative in your cash balances. Benefit level projections, we'll show some screenshots of that report as well. It's so important to understand all the different ways you can look at benefit levels. With our process, we show clients your benefit level based upon your goal contributions, and then a revised benefit level based upon the additional cash needed to be put into the plan to meet that repurchase obligation. And then we also look at benefit levels on value too, because if you have a leveraged ESOP and you're making a $200,000 loan payment to the plan, in the earlier years that may release shares worth $50,000, whereas in later years they may be worth $300,000. And you get to understand that just because your contribution is 5% of pay, what the participant is getting may be worth 3% of pay, 2% of pay, or maybe 10% of pay at the end of the day. So we go through that process as well. And then we show the breakup by groups. We group our participants based upon average tenure with the company and compensation levels. So for example, if you have a 200 participant plan, we may have 5 groups in that plan. And group 1 will be your lower paid, lower tenured employees, and group 5 will be your higher paid, longer tenured employees. We do that because we want to apply different rates to the different groups. For example, turnover is the big one. Group 1 may only average 5 years with the company or less, and group 5 could be at 20 plus years with the company. So we would give group 1, for example, a 20% turnover ratio, whereas group 5 would only get a 5% turnover ratio. And even though group 1 may seem high at 20%, it doesn't have a significant impact on the results because they don't have big balances in the plan yet. They've only been there for a couple of years, they're not fully vested yet. So it does all wash out pretty well in the whole process when you look at that analysis. Here's an example of one of the reports that we give to our clients. It's the company value assumptions page. And our goal here is to help you understand and replicate how the valuation firm determines the company share value. So we'll look at what was the enterprise value for the last year of the valuation, and then what are all the adjustments that you make to those enterprise values. It may be debt, excess cash, the tax benefits of being an ESOP company, SARs, warrants, and we'll work with the client to understand what kind of growth projections they want for enterprise value, as well as we really encourage clients to work with the valuation firm too, to help them forecast over this next 20-year period what should be a reasonable projection for company value. It has a significant impact on the results of the study because you take that enterprise value, you make all the adjustments to get to your equity value, you take that equity value divided by the shares outstanding that year of the company to get your per share value. So we have a number of clients that will say, let's run one study at 5% enterprise growth, one at 10% enterprise growth, and one at 15% enterprise growth to see what kind of cash flow impact that has on the overall results of the study, because it can be quite significant, especially if you're redeeming shares and that share bucket is decreasing every year as outstanding stock. Trust activity assumptions. Here we're looking at what do you foresee happening in the plan? Are you contributing cash to the plan? Are you contributing stock to the plan? Are you making loan payments? And are you making loan payments based upon cash contributions, dividends on allocated shares, or dividends on unallocated shares? Are you putting other dividends in a plan to fund repurchase obligation? It's important to note all those key things because we want to make sure that we're replicating this projection based upon how you feel this plan should be operated in the future. And we'll ask, do you want to contribute a certain percentage of pay to the plan as a starting point, or a flat dollar amount, or flat stock amount? Because that can all be input as different assumptions into this analysis. To the extent there's cash in the plan, we do ask for a rate of return on cash investments to grow that cash base if we need to for future repurchase obligation. And then on that screen, there was the very last columns for recycling or redeeming shares, which is pretty significant with regards to how it's going to impact your overall repurchase obligation. With recycling the shares stay in the plan. They just move from one person to the next. With redeeming the shares leave the plan and can later be put back into the plan via stock contributions or a new loan, or the ESOP could buy back some of those redeemed shares as well through a stock distribution process. So we cover all those things during that initial phone call and share these results with you during the draft scenario reports analysis before we finalize that first scenario and jump to additional scenarios. The other significant thing we look at are participant assumptions. What's going to happen to your participant base? Are you going to grow 5 participants a year, 5% a year, 10% a year? Because that drives your eligible payroll. And not only in terms of headcount, but also compensation increases too. Is your average payroll increase 3% a year, 4%, 2%? We can put that into the analysis to get a good idea of what's going to be your eligible payroll 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Because we'll take that information and compare it to the contributions for that year to make sure that we understand what's the projected benefit level 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, not just over the next 2 or 3 years. So that's pretty important. We also look at diversification. If your plan is 10 years old and your participants have reached age 55, they are eligible to diversify a percentage of their shares. That's included in this analysis because that's a cash flow requirement of the company to fund that repurchase obligation for diversification. However, not everyone does it. It's a discretionary option that people can pick. And we'll ask you, and we'll look at your history over the last 6 to 10 years. How often have people diversified when they are eligible? And we can use that as an assumption in the analysis. And you may want to run that at 30% or 50%, or worst case scenario, 100%, just to get an idea of what's the potential liability for diversification. So we look at that as well. Yes, sir.
What about acquisition? Let's assume you have 100% ESOP and you want to make an acquisition of another company, and let's say it's 35 employees, and they want to put them into the ESOP. Does this software have the capability to deal with that type of situation?
Yeah, so the question was, when you're doing these studies, Say you have an ESOP company and you want to acquire another company that has 35 employees, and you may want to bring the employees into the plan right away or make them wait a year or two. Can that be forecasted into this analysis? And it certainly can, because we would show participant levels growing in that year of the acquisition from maybe 100 participants to 135 participants with their compensation amounts as well, which will increase our overall payroll base to determine what new benefit levels you're going to have with that larger payroll eligible amount. So we can definitely include acquisitions in the analysis as well. We look at distribution policies. Are you paying lump sum? Are you paying installments? Are you delaying distributions? Are you doing cash distributions, stock distributions? Are you doing minimum installment amounts or installment thresholds with regards to if someone's going to get an installment versus a lump sum distribution? All that analysis is incorporated into the study. We also look at the unfortunate events of death and disability, because it can happen with ESOP companies. And we look at history. How often has it happened in your firm that someone has terminated due to death or disability? And we can use that as a ratio for this analysis. But as I had mentioned, we like to group based upon tenure with the company and compensation levels. That will help us be able to identify turnover rates to specific people that will be more likely to fall into that category.
Peter?
Yes, sir. No worries.
So how do you deal with sales increase and gross margin increase within the business as it relates to the company growing?
Yeah, you would run different scenarios with different projections of your sales growth increases over your assumptions.
Do you deal with sales growth or you deal with gross margin?
We generally look at how that's tied to your enterprise value, and we would ask the valuation firm to assist in that regard as well.
So you really have to talk to the evaluation as part of this.
Get the report.
The question is, should you use the valuation firm to get the true picture? And I always recommend, as much as you're comfortable doing that, yes, because you'll get more accurate results to the extent you can include your professional valuation firm that knows your business much better than we do with regards to the company value. Yes, sir. Yeah, a great example is retirement. You may have employees that have reached age 65, but they're not going to retire until age 68 or 69. You can give those employees a special retirement age, because they usually have the bigger balances in the plan anyways. You can forecast out that Tom Smith is going to retire at age 69 as opposed to age 65, so that can help in that regard. And we can tweak some of the distribution policy provisions to say if 50% are going to take the distribution in this year compared to the next, you can massage the analysis to get a better reflection of that as well. But we really focus on retirement ages for the key balances, because that has the biggest impact on cash flow. As I had mentioned earlier, we look at all the different reasons for repurchase obligation. Termination, retirement, death, disability, diversification, and then in total, we compare that to the company's equity value. We want to understand how much repurchase liability is it for this company compared to the company value, because it can be the same number for two different companies that have significantly different values. And we will analyze that over the 20 years, and then at the end of the 20-year period, we average that equity value percentage. And in this example here, the average repurchase obligation is 4% of the company's equity value. That tells me that this company is buying back itself every 25 years through this ESOP program, if it's 100% ESOP. And that could be great for certain companies. Other companies may fall in the 10-year range, where they're buying themselves back every 10 years. And you have to ask the question, is that sustainable long term? So we'll go through that analysis with the client too.
How do you indicate how many people are going to be dying or disability?
Yep. We look at history. The question was how you know who's going to die or become disabled. We look at the last 10 years of the ESOP plan to see how often it's happened in your company. Yep, and we check based on that. Benefit levels we had mentioned earlier. We look at benefit levels by the contributions going into the plan as far as the cash contribution, the stock contribution. But then we also look at the additional benefit or the additional contributions needed to satisfy a purchase obligation. In this example here, they didn't forecast any cash for repurchase obligation. They just said, let's just let the system run and tell us what we need in cash to contribute to the plan for repurchase obligation. And it came out to $42 million. So we include that in our in our benefit level analysis. And then we also look at the value of the shares released. For example, if you look here, the contributions were roughly 2 or 3% of pay for the first 5 years, but what the participant actually gets is more like 8 to 10%. So it's important to share with participants that this is a significant benefit to them that they can get working for an ESOP company that they're not going to get working somewhere else that doesn't have an ESOP like this. The one key thing we wanted to share with you today is that coming in December, we're releasing a new module of this software. And what we're going to do is we're going to allow our repurchase obligation clients the ability to run their own scenarios. We still want to work with you to draft the initial scenario, get everything input into the system, make sure everything is working properly before we release it to you to change assumptions. But we've had clients asking us, can we run our own scenarios? And we've answered that question by saying yes, and we're going to release this version in December that will allow you to see the scenarios that we ran, and you can see all the data we put into the system, and then you can copy that scenario and make a change or two, depending upon what you want to see as a difference in your assumptions, and rerun the reports. That way you can see changing a 5% enterprise growth to a 10% enterprise growth. What kind of impact does that have not only on benefit levels, but also cash flow for the company as well? So again, you'll see the different screenshots that we use with our software. Yes?
Getting back to a comment you just made, which is actually showing future team members, future employees, what the ESOP could do for them. My HR people were always very dangerous. They said that's danger, because you're now saying that this may be the benefit. We've been saying this is what it's done in the past. We don't know.
Yeah, it's important to share with your employees that this is a projection. This isn't set in stone. You know, the market could have a dramatic turn in events. But based upon our best assumptions that we're using, these are potential benefits to you in this ESOP program. And that can be quite positive for a number of ESOPs. So yeah, be careful with how much you, or how you present it. You gotta be careful how you say things. But we'll show you all the different assumptions that were used for participant level assumptions, company compensation increases, participant increases, the distribution policy that was used. We'll show you all the different assumptions for the company value and trust activity assumptions. Were we redeeming shares? Were we recycling shares? How much money were we putting into the plan each year? That way you don't have to recreate the whole scenario all over again. You can just copy it and use it as a starting point, make a change or two, and rerun the reports. To save you time. Yes, sir.
Do-it-yourself model, you guys are still uploading the census.
Yep. Yeah, we want to do the grunt work more than anything for you guys. And then you can use that information to run additional scenarios at your own time and expense. Yes, in this system, what you would do is you would say, we're going to redeem all the shares, but then you have the ESOP buy back some of the shares with cash in a plan. So we do that quite often with a number of clients where they want to focus on a specific benefit level. Say it's 8%. They put 8% of cash in a plan. They have distributions worth maybe 12% of compensation. So the company buys back 4%, the ESOP buys back 8%, and you met your benefit level goal and you satisfied all your purchase obligation for that entire year. So that's a great way to manage benefit levels and your purchase obligation too. We are. Tom, do you want to explain our services?
Yeah.
No, you don't. Yeah,
No.
I should have mentioned
you
that.
don't have.
We'd love you to do that, but you don't have to.
You don't have to.
We have a number of clients that say, I just want a purchase study done, and then they pay us on a consulting basis for that project. You have to send it to me in an Excel file. Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Right.
And then you'll have access to our ESOP Connection website to run additional scenarios if you so choose. Some clients probably won't want to. They may just say, Kevin, just run 3 more scenarios. My time's not worth the cost it would be for you to rerun that. And we'll definitely do those too for certain clients if they want us to continue running additional scenarios. It's not, you got to pick one or the other. Yes, with this software, you can change valuation each year, the 20-year period. You may say 5% for 5 years, and then 10%, and then maybe that's on 5%. And you can definitely do that with this software too. That's probably the biggest change we see with clients is what happens if my enterprise value changes, because that has probably the biggest impact on repurchase obligation. How much time we got? Here's the company value assumptions, where you would enter what is your projected equity value. The system will take that equity value. It'll look at the number of shares outstanding at that point in time by looking at any additional shares put into the plan, any shares being released from suspense that are already in the plan. You'll get your shares outstanding to determine your per share value, and it'll use that for the next year's distribution. So it's pretty interactive with regards to what you can do with the assumptions. You can put new shares in a plan. You can do new loans with the plan if you want to. If you want to re-leverage your plan in 5 years, we can show that happening with the assumptions as well. But those are the key things we had wanted to discuss today. I appreciate you guys taking time to ask questions, listen to our spiel. And if you have any other future questions, by all means, reach out to Tom or myself. We'd be happy to help you understand the service some more. Anything else, Tom?
Great. No, thanks, Peter and Ken, for making it interactive. Stop by our booth or see us after the show, and our clients have been very happy with ESOP Horizon. Hope to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thanks.